Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Tell Show. I'm Isiah Bell,
I'm Barb Walter.
and this is a show where we talk about what the government has in front of us that's distracting us from what we should actually be paying attention to.
And a little bit of fashion because we really do think about this. I wore this. I thought a lot about this. Do I tie it? Do I not tie it? Do I throw it around my neck?
We love a pussy bow.
A pussy bow.
That's,
I
yeah.
know. And I wish you could see every week Isaiah's entire outfit because it's fabulous.
Thank you.
So
And
we think about this more
this is
than
just
he
coming
makes out.
back from work. So, um, I was driving home from work today, and I was thinking about our show, and I was like, I wonder if people are tired of talking about race. And I was listening to some pieces from the State of the Union because normally, like when I was in school at UCSD, I made sure that I was looking at Fox News and every presidential State of the Union, and just so I was well informed. I started this presidential State of the Union, and I was like, I can't do this for my own mental health. I cannot listen to this entire thing. But one of the things that stood out to me was the standing ovation when he said, "We have ended DEI in America." And, as a Black person, I think I always have to think about, like, oh, is this going to make people uncomfortable? Are they going to be tired of talking about this? Is this going to feel like that's all that I think about all the time? But the reality is being a person of color, being anyone who's marginalized in this country, you don't have the luxury of not thinking about it.
I know. Yeah. No, I don't know. I know a little bit about it being a woman, but.
Yeah. And so the main topic I was thinking about was the House passing the bill that is going to be requiring identification
we're Save America, which is a huge, big, fucking voter suppression act.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, because, my parents took the time to educate me about what happened during the civil rights movement and prior to that, with people being denied access to voting and having basically tests for Black people in order to suppress votes of Black people, of marginalized communities. It just all sort of like started flowing back. And I was like, we can't not talk about it because our government keeps making it a front page story.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love that you brought this up. And I think it's important because I think most white Americans are deeply uncomfortable about talking about race.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to admit that America has a, race problem. I think when Obama was elected, half of America, the liberal America, was just like, yay, we're in a post-racial society.
Yeah.
If only it were that easy. But the reality is race has been a part of this country, and racial divisions and racial discrimination and white supremacy has been a part of this country since the very, very beginning. Mm-hmm. And America has never reckoned with that. Like my dad's German. Unfortunately, he's not around anymore. But the Germans did like some of the most horrible things ever, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know how many, maybe over 100 million people were killed, maybe 150 million people were killed in World War II. As a result of German aggression, as a result of their deep, deep racism, anti-Semitism, their sense of white supremacy, they did some of the most horrible, horrible things. And yet, if you look at how they've faced that post World War II, it hasn't been perfect, but they teach what they did. They have had a reckoning with their past. If you go to Germany, they don't often actually fly the flag. You don't see the German flag flying very often. And I think it's because there is this sense of national accountability, or the sense that too much nationalism
Mm-hmm.
can really be a very bad thing. America has never had a reckoning with our racial past, and
Yeah.
I think because of that, we can't get past it. We don't improve. We don't get better. I mean, we get better in some ways, but
Yeah. It
we
doesn't
don't
address,
face it.
well, and I think the reality is a lot of times people like to say, well, at least we aren't where we were back then. And one of the things I always think about is that it was never not there.
Mm-hmm.
It was suppressed because it was politically incorrect for a period of
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And now it is sort of like the trend. It's cool to be
Yeah.
racist. It's like we've got a
Yeah.
whole segment of the population that will
Yeah.
support us in our racism. And we want to say it. We want to say the N word. It feels like something that we should be able to do. I mean, like
Yeah.
that is something that comes across so clearly when you're watching these TikToks or YouTubes of people sort of like having these
Yeah.
racial outbursts in America. And because we've never dealt with the stain that is on this country,
Yeah.
it's something that we are bound to keep repeating.
Yeah. And just as an analogy, and maybe this is a terrible analogy, but it just popped into my head. If you have a family, if there's a family with a deep, dark secret, let's just say there's alcoholism runs in the family or sexual abuse runs in the family. Let's just take sexual abuse because that is something that people suppress and keep hidden. But it gets passed on generationally, right? So let's say, great great grandpa, he was touchy feely, he was handsy, but was actually, raping the kids. We know now that they grow up and they have a tendency to do the same thing, and it just continues and to continue. And nobody in the family wants to talk about it, in part because they're protecting the perpetrators, but also because of a deep sense of shame, right? They don't want to be that family. And the irony is, by never talking about it, they just continue the practice. Whereas if they actually just sat down and aired it and grappled with it, it's likely that it would end. And I think in America, it's the same thing. We have this stain, we have this tendency, we have this thing that we are perpetuating generation after generation. And maybe it's improving, and it is improving, but it's not going away. And until we actually sit down and face it, it's going to continue. And in fact, now during the Trump era, we're going backwards. We're erasing the history. We're erasing, in museums when kids used to go to DC on class trips and read about it. Now they're not reading about it. And so, yeah, it's the absolute worst thing we could do.
I guess the question is like, what do we do? Because what it all comes down to is power.
Yeah.
I mean, when we really boil it all down, it is, if we are to hold ourselves accountable for the actions of our ancestors, what does that mean? What does that look like? What is, I feel like the idea of reparations for Black people in America is such a foreign concept, even though we did do it for other marginalized communities. And so for some reason, there is this block or this barrier that says we shouldn't have to hold ourselves accountable for what we did to Black people in this nation. We can look at, how we've treated the Japanese or how we've treated the Jewish people or how we treated indigenous people. But when it comes to Black people, there is this thing that's innate. I was just watching this woman, and I think it was when they were trying to integrate schools, and it's a white woman, she's talking to a Black man, and she's like, what more do you people want from us? How much more are we supposed to give? And the guy was like, what are you giving? My daughter just wants to go to school and receive the same access to education that your child has. And he was like, you act as if I'm some virile animal.
Yeah. That's a really good way of putting it. I think, well, you know a lot more about this than I do because you've been following it more, but there's at least two strains there. One is, I'm not responsible for the crimes of my ancestors. And so if I didn't have slaves, then, why should I have to pay into reparations or whatever else? And the other is really, what is the other? I mean, that's the am I responsible for those crimes? I think that's the main one, right? Like I didn't participate, and therefore
I shouldn't be penalized.
I shouldn't be penalized.
But the thing is, I think that's the interesting thing, though, is really changing the framing of it and the narrative of it, because if you look at it less as I'm being penalized and more this group is getting an opportunity that they never had access to. Like, I look at affirmative action.
Yeah.
That is still something that benefited white women more than any other marginalized demographic.
Yeah.
And yet that demographic was shouting from the rooftops about, we need to end affirmative action, we need to end DEI. Yeah. And I'm like, you were the benefactors of this.
Yeah.
And so really trying to figure out how to make, I think that's one of the things I think about is, how do I get a group of people who view this as something negative, as something that's a penalty? And I think that's one of the things that really sat with me is like, America got rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes.
I think when people hear the acronym instead of the words, it's much easier to be like, oh, I'm so against this. But really, when you break it down, you're against diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I think there's two problems, and now I'll try to actually answer two problems. I think one is that if you absolutely are unaware of systemic racism, if you don't see it, you've never been aware of it, it doesn't make sense to you, how can you, it's hard for you to embrace diversity, equity, inclusion, because you're like, it's not necessary, because what problem is it addressing? There is no problem. So I think when you're a member of the privileged class, and women are, right? White women are, that it's hard to see what you never experience, right? And so to you, and you grew up in a society that's always talking about that we're a meritocracy, right? And as a woman, you've had to your share of fights, but mostly you buy into the system and
right.
and that it's meritocracy. Then that's where pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? We all have the same, and it comes down to you are not aware, and you just cannot fathom systemic racism in its subtle forms, in its pervasiveness.
Martin Luther King has a really great saying. He says, it's a cruel thing to ask a man to pull himself up by his bootstraps when he has no boots.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the second thing is, if you benefit from the existing system, right? Whether consciously or unconsciously, nobody wants to give up their privileges, right? Nobody, DEI is basically saying, hey, corporate America as one example, but universities and, every other organization, you have to have a more representative sample of people working for you, making decisions for you, and it has to represent America. And currently you don't represent America. And if you are the class that is disproportionately the race that's disproportionately represented in these places, some of those, you're going to lose some of those seats. Right. Those seats are coming from you. And I think nobody likes to give up privilege. And when they start to see those seats being filled with people of color and with people from different religions and people who are quite different from you, with different beliefs and attitudes and preferences, then you see that as a loss, and you feel like you're being discriminated against. That's when for the first time, you're just like, wait, like I'm losing my position because of my race. And that's when you get this ridiculous notion
of reverse racism.
Of reverse racism.
Yeah.
So I think also, I don't know. I think I'm going to throw this out. You can throw this right back at me.
Yeah.
I think probably many people have stories of DEI being, in some cases, like shoved down their throats or pushed on them, and not liking the outcome for whatever reason. There are examples that I saw at UCSD where I was just like, okay, this is a terrible way to implement this policy. This is literally going to alienate everybody and create a situation that's terrible for the people everybody who's involved. So I think it wasn't handled very well, but big deal. Like, big changes are hard and nobody really knows how to do them. And we're learning as we're going along. It certainly doesn't mean you scrap the whole program, right? You throw the baby out with the bathwater. But I think because you had the dominant class who was losing their privilege, they were going to grab onto any, as soon as they had a chance to wipe this away, they were going to do it. And that's what we're seeing today.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one question for you. When this was being rolled out, was it people of color who were having to do the heavy lifting for the rollout of this DEI, or was it white people?
I was not involved at that level of decision making. Okay. I don't know.
I can tell you. So I am currently the co-chair on a DEI committee for a board that I sit on.
Yeah.
And the board is historically been predominantly white, and there was a concerted effort to make sure that we had people of color on this board, that we had people of different gender identities, sexual preferences. And so it was part of our mission statement that we were going to directly be an anti-racist organization. And saying anti-racist made a lot of people uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
And then the co-chairs of the DEI committee are people of color.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things with that. One, you are putting the onus on the people of color to do the work of educating and executing this work.
Yeah.
Two, you're not having the input of non-people of color, of white people, in the discussion. And so, in my opinion, the onus needs to fall on the perpetrator, which is white people.
Yeah.
And their voices need to be a part of the conversation, because I can go and have a conversation with my Black family members or Black friends or people of color or queer people, whatever. There's a like-mindedness there.
Yeah.
But where the work needs to be done is you having the conversation with your networks of people.
Right.
Right. And so I think it's also more palatable if a white person is being talked to about DEI, if they're hearing a white voice, for some reason they can digest that in a better way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think about the women's movement, right? The women's movement needs men who are going to speak for the movement, to advocate for us. So they're sort of the powerful bridge, and it would be the same. It would be the same here. But
the women's suffrage movement started they wanted it to be just for white women.
Yeah.
Until they found that intersectionality.
Yeah.
It didn't go anywhere.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I really liked you saying is, you're expecting the victims to be to be the solution, to fix the
problem.
It. Yeah. And you see this oftentimes where when there's really big reform and change that needs to happen, often people will be like, well, what would be a recent example? I was on a podcast today, which I was telling you, Isaiah, it drove me crazy. But one of the things that we were talking about was, the decline of American democracy, and we spent an inordinate amount of time talking about average Americans need to change their rhetoric, that we need to be more civil. And I thought
this was coming from the podcast host.
We won't say.
Okay.
It was just a discussion,
Okay.
and then the host turned to me and she's just like, yeah, would you like to add something to this? And I said, rhetoric matters, but it's like small beans.
Yeah.
Like our democracy is not declining because we as individuals are not.
Because of our discourse.
Our discourse is mean.
Yeah.
Our democracy is declining. One, because the big institutional features that are supposed to constrain wannabe autocrats are being dismantled. This is a big structural problem. So telling American citizens that you need to do better, we're going to fix this by you guys being nicer to each other is literally ignoring the huge structural reforms that need to take place. It's the same. It's like pull yourself up by the bootstraps instead of saying, well, let's look at all the ways the system is structured to make it impossible for those people to pull themselves.
Right.
Or it's like
the equivalent also of I've been at a dinner and a European man, like from Europe, not just a white guy from Europe, sat across from me and he said, when will you people move on?
Oh, God.
And Barb, you know me.
Like, wouldn't it be nice if we could? There's nothing I want more than to really not have to think about this ever again.
And it was such a simple answer.
Yeah.
And I was like, when you've accounted for your sins, that's when we can move on. When we have true equity, that's when I can move on.
Yeah.
That's when we can all move on.
Yeah.
When your establishments that were created with blood money off of our backs are dismantled so that we have the opportunity to create the same generational wealth, that's when we'll move on.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, it's expecting the people that you have oppressed for all this time, for hundreds of years. And then you're like, but we've been doing better for the past, 70 years.
Yeah.
So why can't you guys get over it?
Yeah. So there's one thing I'm not quite understanding, and I think maybe each of us are making slightly different arguments. You're arguing in part for reparations. Like we, there's so much wealth that we have not been able to accumulate because so much has been stolen from us and we've been prevented from doing other things. But you're also making the argument about the present and the future, that as long as these structures are in place, it's still not an equal playing field.
Right. And okay. I think number one, I think both things can be true. I was like, the one thing is that I think people should be clear that we have every right to still be bringing up what happened in our American history.
Yeah.
That is something that is well within our rights, because what happened in the past has not been even close to rectifying.
Yeah. It's like all that stuff you learn in, if you go to therapy, right? Which I do.
I was going to say, I've been in it for over 20 years, so yes.
But one of the things that we're learning is that, like, probably one of the most important things you can do to somebody who's hurting, and that, let's just say, who feels that they've been victimized in some way, is don't try to fix things. Don't try to just acknowledge that what they are feeling is real, and just say, oh, you're feeling so deeply about this.
Yeah.
First of all, I believe you. Second of all, tell me more, because this is clearly important. And we have not, like, that is what you're saying. You're like, we're going to, as Black Americans, we're just going to keep, we're not going to move beyond this until you finally acknowledge, oh my gosh, Like,
Well, and look
it's
at what has
so
been,
real. It's real. It's, everything you're feeling is completely justified. And we've never said that.
and look at what the government has been trying to do. Look at Florida. We're burning books,
I
essentially.
know. I
We
know.
are removing historical education, or I should say accurate historical education, from schools.
Yeah.
Because people are saying, I don't want my kids to not feel proud of their country. Here's one of the things that I will say. There's a really great thing I saw one time talking about Ruby Bridges, who was the first little black girl in Louisiana to go to a school that was segregated but was becoming integrated. And it said, if she was strong enough to live it,
Yeah.
your kids are strong enough to read about it and understand it.
And I don't know why you would think that's mutually exclusive. Why you can't be incredibly proud of your country, even if your country hasn't been perfect, even if your country has huge stains on its history.
There's not a place in the world that doesn't have huge stains all over it.
Yeah. But I think that's just an excuse.
Of course.
I don't, that's not reality.
Of course.
I think
it's a nationalistic narrative.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I guess I think too is like, so he made it a point, the president made it a point at the State of the Union to say, one of our successes, because that's really what you're doing at the State of the Union. You're wanting to address where the country is in its standing currently and all the successes that this administration has had. Making that a point, I mean, every Republican stood up and just, we're so proud we've ended DEI in America. What is that saying to his base? What is that riling up in them that we need to be looking at and say to ourselves, okay, what do we need to be combating?
What does that say to his? I mean, the Republican Party today is about 80% white. They're overwhelmingly evangelical Christian. It's got a big white supremacist, white Christian nationalist element to it. It's not only that, not only do they not think DEI is necessary, not only do they think this is bad for the country. The U.S. is a white Christian nation, which, by the way, again, not a Christian nation, secular nation, but they think it's deeply, deeply threatening to they'll say the identity of the country, but it's really to their quality of life and again back to their privilege, right? So DEI, it's literally like what would be a good analogy? Okay, let's just take apartheid Africa, right? Now that's taking white nationalism to the extreme, where you literally have a white minority government, and you've now you control almost every aspect of the black majority in their lives.
I was just going to say, maybe we give a little bit of context to what apartheid is in case someone doesn't know.
Oh, I'm going to trust actually that I'm going to trust you guys.
It was a class.
It was a system based on race. Segregation and oppression.
Yeah.
But where you have that system, and then suddenly somebody's like, well, maybe we should have maybe the government and maybe businesses and maybe beaches and schools should be more not entirely representative of the country, because the blacks were overwhelmingly the majority and are overwhelmingly the majority in South Africa. But we'll just open it up a little bit. I mean, it's like in that sort of situation, it is the end. It is the end of your dominance.
Yeah.
It's the end of your dominance. And I think DEI it's also where suddenly you're like, oh, my lily white golf club where I could always go on the weekend and it was all men, and and I could behave any way I wanted and nobody would talk about, and I was protected. Suddenly I have to share this, and they don't see that as making it better, right?
Right.
It's not going to improve their lives, right? It's going to take away their privilege, and historically no matter what group is privileged, they tend to fight to retain it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Here's what I would say is I always go back to it's hard to hate up close. If you are a person that is in the minority, that is marginalized, go befriend someone who is in the majority. Let them see you. Let them get to know your life. Let them get to know your experiences. Humanize what they marginalize. I think because I'm constantly thinking about like, what's actually going to have some impact on what people can do in their everyday lives. And I think a lot of times it is more comfortable to stay within your race group or your sexuality group or your gender group, or, it's comfortable. And I think that having that sort of like siloed experience is what gives life and breath to a party that exists on hate.
Yeah. So there's really interesting political science research that's looked at what happens in cities across the United States that elect their first Black mayor. And these are cities like Memphis and Los Angeles and Chicago. And the question is, like, what happens in the lead up, what happens during, what happens afterwards? And there's a very clear pattern. In the lead up, it's exactly what you saw in Los Angeles, exactly what you saw with Pete Wilson when California was turning, majority non-white. It's all doom and gloom and threat, and usually it's focused on economic issues. So it's like the economy of the city is going to go to hell. Whites are going to flee the city. Money's going to flee. The businesses are going to flee. It's just going to be absolutely disastrous. And then if a Black mayor is successful and is elected, one of the things that these studies have found is that the Black mayor is actually more inclined to keep the status quo than a white mayor would be. That they're very careful not to piss off the white population. That it's kind of like Obama, right? Obama was not as transformational as most people hoped he would be, because he was a Black man who's come up in a white world, and he understands that a Black man who pushes and pushes and pushes is probably going to be punished for it.
Well, and I mean, the sad part of that is that I do believe that he was more transformational than people give him credit for. However, I do look at the white lash that happened because he was in office. And this was still a man that stayed pretty close to the status quo of what presidents do. And we still had this whole movement when he got out of office that we did it. We had the great experiment. We had a person of color in this office.
Yeah.
We are never going to go back to that again. And
militias really started to grow starting around 2008, most of which were white nationalists.
Yeah.
Right. So there was absolute white backlash. But once a Black mayor in office is actually doesn't impose, these big progressive policies, doesn't disproportionately pursue policies that benefit the Black community. Actually, it kind of bends over backwards to
appease and acquiesce to the white. Yeah.
And these cities do not decline in any way.
Yeah.
So and once that experience happens, once people actually see that Black mayors do a good job or don't ruin their cities, a lot of the resistance to Black mayors moving forward declines. But without that experience, all of this fear mongering and these stereotypes and these narratives, people tend to believe them and they're effective. And of course, opponents of these mayors use those.
It's the big Black scare. It's like that's what America has used for so long, is that, when you're walking down the street, if you see, Black people or a group of Black people on the sidewalk, you probably should cross. You should probably clench your purse a little tighter.
Yeah.
And that's a narrative that has been ingrained
in
many Americans. I mean, even within the Black community, if you grew up in a certain place and then you see a certain group of Black people, then there are Black people who will move across the street.
Yeah.
Because we've been told this bill of lies about who Black people are.
Yeah.
I think we are at time for this episode, but thank you all for tuning in. I'm glad we got to have a conversation that, like I said, I was nervous because I was like, it's just something that is always on a person of color's mind is like, are they going to get tired of this? Or are they going to get worn out because we're talking about race? But like I said, it's something that is so present and it is affecting so much of what's happening in our political realm right now that it's impossible not to discuss.
And again, it's like, I can't bear to keep sweeping it under the rug. Like this podcast today, I brought up race and there was one of the responses was, I really think it's all about class. Oh my God. That's, how many decades have we been hearing, no, it's really about class. No, it's not. Look at the Republican Party. Who overwhelmingly votes for the Republican Party's poor whites, middle class whites, rich whites. They're very different classes.
Right.
They have one thing in common.
Yep. Agreed. And on that note, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time.